Thank you for joining us today. I'm Karen Merrill, LCSW, presenter and EAP counselor, and I will be leading today's Lunch and Learn on handling life's transitions. Joe Bryson's on the line with us, and he'll be doing the polling question tallying. So we're both here together. So as this first slide shows us with the message in the fortune cookie, no big surprise, you'll all go through a big change in your life, and probably more than one. The learning objectives for today are to understand the difference between change and transition, to discuss what we call the transition model, recognize different responses to change, learning do's and don'ts of handling life's transition, and then towards the end, we'll be talking about how to learn to build resiliency, which insulates us from all this change and transition. If you've sat in our presentations before, you know that we ask questions as we go along to help make the presentation more interactive, and then we'll leave time at the end for any questions you may have. We'll be respectful of your time and make sure we keep it under an hour. So keep in mind, if you're in a bad situation, don't worry, it'll change. And on the flip side, if you're in a good situation, don't worry, it will change. Life is all about change and transition. And if we think we're going to reach a time when life just kind of perks along without these bumps in the road, we'll be ill-prepared for what life can throw us. So as we've kind of set the stage, the one constant is change. Why do we resist this? Actually, change and then transition is movement into the unknown. And in our primitive reptilian brain, the unknown equals danger to us. We're not sure what's coming. It can create a crisis. In fact, it can create an opportunity too, but it can feel very unsettling. It's a departure from our comfort zone and a departure from what's familiar. As humans, we like what we're used to, what's familiar. We go to work the same way. We go to the same places to eat and have recreation. So we get into these modes of familiarity, and the departure from that can be unsettling and a challenge. So when we go through a change or transition, there's lots of different feelings that we can expect. And they're not mutually exclusive. We can have many of them at different times. So we can feel angry. We can feel helpless. We can feel trapped. We can feel some relief that a change is coming. Some folks are energized by change and transition. Sometimes we're fearful, we're anxious, and we can become depressed. All common, appropriate feelings in response. So our first polling question is, when you think about a significant recent transition in your life, did you feel angry, anxious, relief, or energized, depressed, or helpless? And knowing that you may have felt many of these at different times, when I first asked the question, what was the first predominant feeling that you experienced? So we'll give you a couple of minutes, and then we'll ask Joe to tally them up, and we'll report back to the group what the common responses were.
All right, so we're just kind of waiting for a few more folks to chime in. We've heard about 3/4 people so far. So
okay.
All right. So most people have chimed in so far. About 14% said angry. About 63% said anxious. About
was that
18%.
63 for anxious. 63 for
mm-hmm.
anxious. Okay.
Mm-hmm. About 18% for relief or energized. About 13% for depressed. And about 17% for helpless.
Okay. So that's good information. It tells us that the predominant feeling for change and then transition is anxiety. And anxiousness is kind of, fear related. We're not sure what's happening. We're not sure what's coming. So good information to know. And also when we kind of get to what the do's or don'ts are, to kind of keep that in mind is really how do we manage our anxiety through change and transition will be a good thing to remember. So thanks for responding to that. So we looked at common feelings, and so now what are the responses? What do we do in response to these feelings? The first one we call that fight or flight. We try to either run away from it or fight it so that we don't have to deal with it. Sometimes or at some point towards the readaptation, we can cope and thrive. We can get angry, mad, resentful. We can stuff our feelings, try to deny them or avoid them. Get depressed, withdraw and isolate. Also, withdrawing and isolation are responses to anxiety as well. We get into power struggles, try to pick battles to change the reality of the situation. What we hope to learn to do is actually express the feelings that we have, like identifying whether we're angry, anxious, depressed, or what those feelings are, so that we can reorient. And also, I think, then coming to expecting to recover and looking for opportunity. What we learn about ourselves as we've gone through other changes in transition is that we come out on the other side, and what those tools are kind of to help us get there. So now looking at what is transition and what is change. So change is the shift in the external. I think about change as the event. It's the thing that causes the transition, and we'll look in a minute at what those are. Transition is the psychological or the internal reorientation that people make. It's the adjustment phase. It's how we get to the other side. It takes much longer, and it always starts with an ending, which is the change or a loss, and not in necessarily a dramatic way, but any time there's change and transition, it starts with an ending. I mean, change, that's what change means. And then the ending is closely followed by what we call this uncertainty, this middle period, and unfamiliarity that can create fear and anxiety, but ultimately it can also create opportunity. So lots of folks in our field do research about how we make sense of our feelings and behaviors through things that happen to us. And William Bridges created what he calls this transition model that looks at stages of change and moving through transition. So first we have the ending. We have this neutral zone, which is that middle period, that longer period, and then the beginning. And if you think about it, there's a lot of similarity to this and a grief model of how we recover from loss and go through stages of grief before we get to the new beginning. So the ending or the change, this is the event that's occurred. And it can be any number of things. It can be major events like a death close to us, a divorce, a change in family situation, marriage, retirement, relocation, change in relationship, change in job, either a downsizing or a change in a job within the organization as a result of a reorganization. So it's the thing that causes us to have to make an adjustment. It's what we call, again, the ending or the change. Then the next phase is what we call this neutral zone. It's the in-between time, in between one world and another, one identity and another, in between one way of doing things and learning new ways of doing things. It can feel like everything's up for grabs. What may develop hasn't yet. There's ambiguity, there's uncertainty, there's some self-questioning. Am I going to be able to make this transition and make this adaptation? What used to work doesn't, so we can feel kind of helpless and anxious about what to do. What is to be isn't. We can feel empty about that and feel unfamiliar again and have self-doubt. And then hopefully we come to some feeling of creativity. When things are in flux, it's when we really have the most opportunity for change. So this neutral zone, Marilyn Ferguson tells us it's not so much that we're afraid of the change or we're so in love with the old ways, but it's that place in between that we fear or makes us anxious. It's like being in between trapezes or Linus when his blanket's in the dryer. It feels like nothing, there's nothing to hold on to. It's like, for me, it's kind of like thinking you're in the middle of a lake in a canoe and you can't see land and you feel like, ooh, can I go back or should I go forward? It's that feeling of uncertainty. So what are signs of transitional stress? We categorize them into 4 sections, kind of physical reactions where we can feel, have an upset stomach, we can have sleep issues, we can be overly tired, we can feel that kind of fight or flight reaction, the physical symptoms that our body tells us. It can affect our thinking or cognitive functions where it's difficult to make decisions or we're confused, hard to focus. We can blame, look for others to blame or even blame ourselves, feelings of being overwhelmed and having trouble with memory. It's that we get flooded and that our brain doesn't know how to categorize this information, and so we end up reacting in ways of trying to cope. Emotional reactions are very, very common, like many identified anxiety. We can feel fear, grief, worry, irritability, anger, and so these are things that, when we think about, affects not only us, it's going to affect those around us, or those that are close to us are also sensing what we're experiencing, and those that we work with. Signs of transitional stress include behavioral, where we may want to withdraw or change in activity, where we may eat more or less. We may drink more or less. We're looking for ways to numb our feelings or cope with our feelings, and it can show up in behavioral ways as well. So now, looking at our second polling question, if you think about this recent transition and knowing that you may have felt, many of these things, were your transitional stress mostly physical, cognitive, emotional, or behavioral. And again, we'll give you a minute or so, and then we'll tally it up.
All right, just give you a couple more seconds. Got, again, about 3/4 of people responded so far, so. Okay, so just about everyone got back so far. So about 25% said physical, about 62% said emotional, about 22% said cognitive, and about 18% said behavioral.
Okay. So this is consistent, really, when you think about that, anxiety is an emotional response. So these responses are consistent with the first one. So again, good information to keep in mind as we look at how to manage our resiliency to these changes and transition. So thanks for doing that. And we'll keep going. So transition challenges us in many ways. As we move through these emotional and behavioral and other kinds of transitional stages, we learn more about who we are. We can cause us to kind of really realign our values and priorities. So if this change is major in my life, what's really important to me? Where do I want to put my energy in the kinds of direction I'm going to go next? So it shows us what we're capable of. It can strengthen our relationships because it can bond us to others as we work through this together. And it can also kind of tap into what we have to be grateful for in our lives. And we'll talk a little bit more later, but challenge does do that. As we move through crisis and change, it can kind of resonate for us what we have to be grateful for. So now looking at 4 common responses to change. Your own response to change may vary from situation to situation, and we're going to look at 4 typical responses. They're all normal, they're legitimate, one's not better than the other, and initial responses may shift during a change. You might be a navigator in one mode and revert to being a victim in another. For example, if you get news of a relocation, the first feeling might be, oh my gosh, feeling victimized by all the things that are required in a relocation, learning a new place, having to find all these new resources. And then it might be that you become a navigator and think, wow, what an opportunity to be able to understand what another environment is like. So as we go through each of these different modes, take note in any of the responses that you identify with. And then when we get to the what to do section, take note of any ideas you think might be helpful to you specifically. So we'll start with the victim. And I think we can all identify that we may have felt this way in different changes and transition. But a behavior can look like resisting it, feeling angry, sticking with the old ways and not feeling comfortable or wanting to go a new direction, not asking for help when it might be helpful, and isolating ourselves. And the attitude there can look like, why is this happening to me? It's kind of like, why me? This isn't fair. Why can't things stay the same as they are? Not that it's necessarily, these are rational, but it's very common responses that we can have. We all have seen the critic in our environment in response to change in behavior, looking for reasons why the change won't be successful, being the naysayer. Well, this isn't going to work. It hasn't worked in the past. I don't see why it would work now. Failing to see, even resisting to see any positive outcomes and challenging it. Is this really necessary? I doubt this change will improve anything. Another response can be, we did this a long time ago, so why would we go back to it now? Another common response is as a bystander. Excuse me, I'm taking a drink of water. Where a behavior would be reluctance to get involved, standing on the sidelines, waiting for others to make decisions and take the lead. And that attitude, or kind of the hidden, the fantasy is, if I ignore this change, it'll go away. I'm not going to jump in until I know it's safe. I'll wait until the more experienced people have paved the way. This is the bystander who kind of sits, again, on the sidelines. And then we have the fourth. We have what we call the navigator mode. This is a part of the change and transition where we look for ways to minimize the negatives, exploring the causes or the reasons. So it gives us something to kind of hang on to help us understand it. We think about how we might be useful and supportive, what the opportunities are, and forming more nurturing relationships. Attitudes would look like, this change prevents opportunities to do things differently and to see things differently. This is a chance to make things better. And this is really important, is to recognize that we're bound to make mistakes, but we're going to learn from them as we go. If we can anticipate how we may respond to change, we can be more proactive in acknowledging and managing our own reactions, which is really an important part of being a navigator in a change mode. Polling question 3. In thinking about this recent transition that we're referencing, did you see yourself primarily, now we know that it can be in many of these directions, primarily as a victim, a critic, a bystander, or the navigator?
All right. Just wait a couple more moments for some more people to respond.
Okay.
Okay, looks like most people had a chance to respond so far. So about 30% said victim.
Okay.
About 16% said critic.
Okay.
About 18% said bystander.
Uh-huh.
And about 48% said navigator.
That's great. So almost half, and certainly the largest percentage of folks see themselves as proactive and being able to kind of take the high road and be more of a navigator for change. And I would suspect if we were all in the room together and I'd ask you, you've probably had a lot of experience with change and transition, and so have kind of learned some things that can help you take on that role. So we're going to move to the do's and don'ts section of the presentation. So looking at the don'ts, don't be afraid of the future and that predict success. Pick the wrong battles, and we've all seen this happen in our environments where we kind of latch on to something that is not going to get us anywhere. Psychologically unplug from our job. Doesn't matter to me. I don't really care. Try to eliminate the uncertainty and the instability and assume that those in charge should keep us comfortable. These are kind of don'ts, common pitfalls, but also ones that keep us from really navigating through change. Understanding that change kind of ratchets up our vulnerability to stress, and stress can cause a lot of other things that we don't want to happen. So keeping in mind that we need to be the one in charge of managing our own stress. Deciding not to change is a stressful reaction. Don't act like a victim, and don't try to control the uncontrollable. We can oftentimes, in times of change and transition, feel like it's not fair and it's not a change or transition that we welcome or would choose. And so we try to backpedal or to try to control the uncontrollable. And all that does really is takes away our energy and dilutes our ability to focus on what's within our control, which is the only thing that we really have control over. So we think about how to take care of ourselves. Dealing with change can stress us out easily. It depletes our energy. It can, kind of thin our focus on many different things. So to be able to then kind of look at our physical health, our belief system and our values, our emotional health. Am I grumpy? Am I difficult to get along with right now? Am I depressed? Am I sad? The things that we're in tune with that can help us move forward gives us much more power over how we'll come out on the other side. So the do's. Do control your attitude. And really a lot of this is being mindful of what your attitudes are like and what your views are like. Being aware of our sleeping patterns, our eating patterns, and all of those things. Being tolerant of mistakes. As we learn new things, we can't know what we don't know. It's going to take time to learn things. And being tolerant of our own mistakes and others, and cutting ourselves some slack. Expecting change. It's the world we live in. Being prepared for what we call a psychological soreness, where we can feel uncomfortable. Understand that others may see things differently than we do, and have the ability to kind of park our problems. There are certain things that you may not be able to deal with at that moment, so you park them somewhere so that it doesn't interfere with how you're feeling or enjoying your life as you move through day to day. Do's continue. Keep your sense of humor. Very important to see the light side and not get laden down with worry about change. Practice stress management techniques, and we've all probably had practice in knowing which of those are the most effective for us on an individual basis. Eat, exercise, and rest. Some very simple kinds of things, because it's hard to tackle something new when we're hungry, tired, or inactive. So remembering those three things. Remembering that your EAP is available for just the times when you experience change and stress. EAP is free, it's confidential, it's there for you. And another do is to keep doing your job. Tips for relieving stress. There are many of these that we were aware of. And some of them look like yoga, deep breathing, positive visualization. I think this is different for all of us. For some, it's, a stroll along the beach, imagining the sound of the waves, looking at the sunshine, a peaceful meadow, whatever that vision is that you can go to that blocks out the stressors of that moment can be helpful. scheduling time to relax, making sure that in a day's time that you build in some time to re-nurture yourself. Again, walk, run, exercise, nothing like aerobic activity to help bleed off stress and raise your serotonin. It's just a really overall good thing. Petting an animal. Lots of research on how when we pet an animal, brush an animal, it reduces our blood pressure, it reduces their blood pressure. It's a wonderful interaction. Send yourself flowers, go bowling, golfing, shopping, the movies, see a play, whatever it is that makes you feel nurtured and refreshed. Get away for the weekend. Keeping a gratefulness journal. Lots of information on if folks kind of key into what they feel grateful for and even write it down. First thing in the morning, think of 5 things you feel grateful for, and we'll look forward to that day. And then at the end of the day, what you have to be grateful for. What we find is that we surpass the number we've set for ourselves. So if we think we're going to say we have 5 things, it can multiply. It's a focus on the positive. So also our website, www.myrbh.com, has lots of good topics and areas of interest, including handouts on stress. And attached to our training today are a couple of handouts. One is called 52 Proven Stress Reducers, and the other is called 12 Ways to Increase Our Stress Fitness. And we'll take a look at those at the end of the training, just as reminders of some other stress reducers. So thinking about how you successfully got through adversity in your life can be helpful moving forward. So when you think back about a stressful event or adversity, what strengths did you see yourself call upon to move forward? And what did you think, what do you say that you learned from that? So coming back to a current situation, what of those can you apply to a current situation that can help you get through? It's like, not reinventing the wheel. It's, here's what I learned last time, and if it worked then, it's likely to work again in other stressful transition situations. So, our last polling question for this presentation as we move towards resiliency. All of the following are true about resiliency, except resiliency amounts to seeing the glass half full. Resiliency is the ability to bounce back. Resiliency is part of our DNA. We're born with it. Resiliency helps us through our lifespan. Resiliency helps us at work, at home, and in our personal relationships. So we'll give you a minute or two.
Okay, and looks like about 2/3 of folks have got back so far.
Okay.
All right, so yeah, most people have responded so far, and yeah, got kind of split a few different ways. So about 30% said A, resiliency results in seeing the glass half full. About 27% said B, resiliency is the ability to bounce back. Biggest portion there, 57% said C, resiliency is part of our DNA.
Okay.
And 21% D, resiliency helps throughout our life. And 27% said E, resiliency helps at work. home and personal relationships.
Well, good. So you may be surprised because the one that really isn't true, although people have different temperaments, but resiliency isn't part of our DNA. It's really not something that we're born with. We can learn and kind of increase our ability to be resilient. So it's interesting because you think about that some people are just more resilient than others, but in fact, it really is that resiliency is something that we develop. We develop through time. Resiliency, if you think about it, it is the ability to bounce back. If I think about like holding a sponge and compressing it and then opening and it bounces back. It's the ability to recover or to adjust from a misfortune or a change. And it's the ability also to learn from previous phases of adversity and to learn from our mistakes about what worked and what didn't work. And it's something that's been a lot of work on resiliency because there is so much change in our lives and so much transition in our lives that we've learned that really kind of strengthening our resiliency to it is the way to go. So how do we do this? How do we build resiliency skills? It's accepting what is, not arguing with reality. We don't have to like it, and we can voice that we don't like it, but that doesn't mean that we can change it. So we really, taking the victim mode, we need to do kind of evict the victim and accept what is, and then go into that navigator role. Watch our perceptions and our expectations, making sure they're in line with what's realistic. And when we have too many expectations, then we are more likely to get disappointed. One thing that I think is really important is to kind of listen to those tapes in our head when we start woulda, shoulda, coulda, all that kind of thinking. Those generally end up making us feel bad and are more a path to judgment and not really what reality is than what is and what we have control over. So, and resiliency skills does. It helps us cope with change and transition as we move through life. Another thing that's really important as we live our life and go through these changes is laughter. I think one of the trainings we do is on laughter, health and happiness. And we found that laughter, good belly laugh, does all kinds of good things. It lowers our blood pressure, it clears our thinking, boosts serotonin, helps us relax, helps repair conflicts. So smiling, laughing, finding things of humor can be really helpful as we move through stress. So try to remember, change is the only constant. Everyone goes through change. It doesn't have to be negative, and the help is available. If you go through a change or transition and you feel stuck, review the do's on this training and try some of them out. Talk to a supportive friend, a boss, use your EAP. We appreciate you listening today. And I think before, I was going to review the handouts that are posted at the bottom, but before doing that, so that we're sure we end on time, are there any questions that anybody would like to ask that you'd like a response to before we close?
Yeah, if you've got any questions, go ahead and type them up in the little box you have available, and I'll read them off. If you have any, we'll see if we can get to them. I'll give you a couple minutes to go ahead and put those in with us. And as a quick note, our recorded trainings are available on our webpage, our YouTube page, probably in the next couple of days. So if you wanted to review part of the training or share it with coworkers or anything like that, you can access that on our YouTube page. You can get there at the myrvh.com website as well. And so somebody had a question about RVH benefits and stuff like that, and I can answer that for Karen, I guess, since since I take calls and stuff from folks that are looking to use their EAP benefits. So if you do have benefits with Reliant Behavioral Health, you can call us and we can tell you what your benefits are, how many sessions you might have available for in-person counseling and things like that. You also have the ability to speak with a counselor over the phone, and that's actually available to you 24/7, anytime the day or night, weekend doesn't matter. And then if you just wanted to chat with someone briefly and get some in-the-moment support or guidance or anything like that, you can always feel free to call us there. And then, of course, in addition to that, you have in-person counseling available depending on your particular benefit. You'll have a certain number of sessions available to you to use with your benefit. And
can I say something about that too?
Oh,
yeah,
certainly.
I was just going to say that, and I think you alluded to it, but I think well, actually, I guess just some folks have that what they call the teletalk program, where you do have telephonic counseling as well. So, just wanted to throw that in.
Okay. And one person says they found it hard to be resilient when you have health conditions. What tips or recommendations would you make for folks that are kind of finding that challenge? Yeah,
well, I would certainly agree that is an additional obstacle or kind of barrier. I would say certainly, making sure that those health conditions are being managed with medical folks and knowing kind of what direction that is. And then I would say it would be a perfect opportunity to utilize the EAP and talk to a counselor about, here's what I'm dealing with and I'm finding it difficult and I need some, I could use some help on this. So that would be my suggestion there, to be able to specifically kind of share one-on-one with somebody what you're going through, and then help somebody kind of create a game plan and set some goals for yourself.
Okay. And another person asks if you have any recommendations for books on the subject of dealing with change and coping with transition and things like that.
Yeah. What I would do, I'd look at our website. I'd look at the website for, some tips. And then, the market is flooded. There's a lot of information. And so I would say either, take yourself to the bookstore and go, for lack of a better word, to the self-help section and see what specifically speaks to you. I mean, you can do that through online as well, but I think sometimes when you see different titles lined up on a bookshelf, then you're able to be able to see what really speaks to you specifically. There's one, I'm just looking actually, frankly, at my bookshelf, and there's one book that is called The Resiliency Advantage. It's by Al Siebert, who also wrote a book called The Survivor Personality, and that's a good one. But the most recent books on stress management and surviving change kind of zero in on resiliency and how to get through change and transition.
Great, thanks, Karen. Another question someone had about, will this information that we shared today in the webinar be available in like a PDF format or something? And we can send a copy of the slides to you as well if you'd be interested in receiving that. So feel free to reach out to us and request a copy of that. We can get one to you. And then again, it'll be posted on our YouTube page. The recording will be later. And then somebody asked what the phone number was as well. It's probably up on your screen, but the general number for Reliant Behavioral Health is 866-750-1327. And one of our representatives here can answer your questions, let you know about your benefits and things like that. It might even be me. There's a distinct possibility that may happen if you call a little later. So keep that in mind. Happy to help you. And another person asked, we've got a few more questions, not sure if we'll have time to get to all of them, but we'll deal with what we can. And Karen, let us know how much time you need for the handouts you wanted to go over as well. You seem to indicate that resiliency is tied to optimism. Is that true? And how would a pessimist deal with change? There have been examples of that happening before, people have pointed out. So
yeah. So I think if you translate optimism into kind of looking on the bright side and not kind of taking a Pollyanna role, but when you feel pessimistic or when reactions tend to be on the negative side, challenge yourself to what's another way of looking at this, or how would so-and-so say this, look at this, or how would I see this if I felt better? How would I see this if I were well rested and if I had other things kind of going for me? In other words, challenging your thinking and your perceptives to see the other side of it. Because I think we get into habits of thinking and habits of behavior, and it affects our attitude. So I think we have to challenge ourselves. And, if we're around people that are negative or have been around people that are less optimistic, it can rub off on us. So I think we have to challenge ourselves to try to see things in a different way. And I'm not minimizing the difficulty. It's not easy, but I think it's a worthwhile goal to try to move towards.
Okay, great. Thanks, Karen.
Mm-hmm.
And someone else asked if you have the author of the transitional model that you recommended.
It was Bridges. Yeah, William Bridges is his name. Yeah.
Okay. And then one person asked, am I crazy? I like change. It's exciting. What would you say, Karen?
No, you're not crazy. No, you're not crazy. I think we're all different in that way. Some people, and I think there were some examples, are energized and they like it. I think it's just personality. I think it's just kind of, we could sort through why that exactly is, but I think it's just what drives you. I think it's fine.
Okay. All right, great. Thanks, Karen. So I think the majority of the questions that we've received so far, you've been able to answer. There's a few people that have asked kind of more specific questions about their benefits and things like that, what might be available and all that. So I definitely encourage people to give that number a call, 866-750-1327, and talk with someone here to have those questions answered. And also you can go to our website, again, myrbh.com, and learn a little bit more about what sort of benefits might be available to you and things like that. And again, depending on which employer you're with, you'll have a couple of different possibilities of precisely what's available to you. So definitely encourage you to give us a call if you have some questions about that. We can help you out.
Okay. So just in the last couple of minutes, because I want to be respectful of your time, these show the handouts that are attached to the bottom of our training, and one of them is this 52 proven stress reducers. And if you've ever been to a benefits fair, RBH benefits fair, oftentimes we have a stack of these at the table, and they're just simple reminders about some things that help us reduce stress in the moment. Breathing, stretching, organizing, cutting down on caffeine, keeping a journal, trying yoga. And the idea is, the reason there's 52 is that it's like one a week for a year. I like 43, simplify, and then 50, the last one, is to smile. I don't know, is a good one. So that's, something to print out and have and on hand. And then the other one is 12 ways to improve your stress fitness. And it includes kind of a little scale where you could take a fitness scale on if you're stressed, and it's got all these questions, and it's a 1 to 5 scale, and it just gives you some idea about what your level of stress fitness is. And then strategies, talking it over, rest, recognizing what upsets you, kind of knowing yourself about that, exercising, very, very similar things to what we talked about in the training, making sure our values are in sync, methods for relaxation, whatever that is for you, aware of alcohol, stress, use of relaxation techniques. I think a good one is kind of remembering on our eating habits. Sometimes if we eat 3 to 6 small balanced meals, it's better for our levels of blood sugar and lethargy. We feel well nourished. Taking a break, even when we're really in the midst of something, if we feel blocked or flooded, just getting up and taking a short walk, whether it's down the hall, can help oxygenate our brain to be able to make decisions. And if anybody's using nicotine, that's really seriously committing to discontinuing that can be really helpful. So, and again, those are attached to your training at the bottom, and so you've got those available to you. So knowing that it's almost 1, I want to thank you again for listening and attending the webinar today. And if you had any other questions that you wanted answered by me, you can forward those to Joe also, and he can forward those to me, and I can respond. So if there's nothing else, then I think we'll close. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I think that's about it. A few more questions did come in, so we started talking about those handouts. So I will see if I can get those forwarded to you, Karen, and hopefully we can get some people some responses and all that. But again, if you have some real specific questions about a particular situation you're in with a boss or a coworker, and you just want some advice or something like that, feel free to give us a call, and that's what we're here for. So
have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Right. Thank you, Karen.
You bet. Bye.